Yes, people, Ricky here from Behind the Bars TV. This is podcast number 3. I've got Danny Christie over there. He's going to share his story with us and how his journey is and how he's got to where he is now. Would if you just like to introduce yourself?
I'm Danny Christie, and I'm on the Ricky Colleen Behind the Bars podcast. Hope everyone enjoys it.
Well, the last time we were here in this room, it was Danny was interviewing me on his podcast. I think at the time I only had a couple of hundred subs, and I think you had about 10,000, didn't you?
Thereabouts, mate, yeah.
So I'm currently at 11,000 subscribers, and Danny's double his. You're at about 21 or something now, is it?
Mate, aye.
So you're doing well, mate. But it's a pleasure to get you on the dear, mate.
Absolutely, mate.
But what we're going to do is just go maybe back to the start, a little bit about your childhood. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
Born in Carlisle, born and bred. Curragh, our estate. Curragh, I'm back there now. I love the place. I love the estate. I love the people. I love the town. I was born in 1985 in a back bedroom in Buchanan Road. Sharply took round to the St Martin's Hospital, which is no longer there. It's like a college now. But not a lot of particularly bad memories, from when I was growing up. My mum and dad were addicts at the time. My mum got herself into a bit of trouble and that. And I went away to live with my granddad. Lived with my granddad a while. I always called him Dad. By this time, my dad had died when I was 3. I don't have any particular memories of him. One memory, which I'm not sure is an actual memory. But listen, childhood was good. No problems. I was cheeky. Always told I was very cheeky. Always had a lot to say. Could never shut up. But listen,
that was going to be my next question, obviously, about your dad and all that.
Aye.
Obviously, you've just answered it there. So
yes, mate.
So if you didn't have that sort of father figure, was that when your granddad was like did he come in as like your dad figure?
Excuse me, my granddad, I always called him my dad, he was very much my father figure. He was the only person I was ever really bothered about upsetting. I was his blue-eyed boy. I never wanted to upset him, and the sad truth is, kind of my mum kind of lost all authority, if you like, by the time I got to about 11-year-old. Excuse me, I'm vaping too much. My mum, I was quite bad. I was cheeky, and my mum gave us a number of hidings, when I was younger, and I remember some of them, and I deserved every single one of them. I was handful for her. But I got to about 11-year-old, and I just couldn't, bring myself to be bothered about, upsetting the woman.
Yeah.
I just kind of lost respect, and she definitely lost authority. And the only person that could sort of bring us back in line was my granddad. He would say jump, and I'd be in midair asking if it was high enough. He had that level of authority of us, and he always did have.
And was he like a good role model as well?
He was the best, he was the greatest man I ever knew. Greatest man I ever knew in my life. He was old school. He never swore. He never drank. He never smoked. He was a Korean War veteran. He was a legend, absolute living legend. And them people, excuse me, not just my granddad, whole range of people at that age. The majority of people seem to have how can I put it, very different values to what we've got these days.
Yeah.
And he was very humble. He was very strict with himself. He was married to my nana for 48 years. Before she passed. That was his first ever girlfriend. And like I've said, that level of commitment and those moral values that generation had, I think it's extinct. I don't think them type of people will ever be born again. And I miss him. I miss him every day. He was a brilliant man.
So did it ever come to it where like you ever flogged you for being naughty, or did you always have that?
No.
Or did you always sort of bow down to him because you respected him that much?
He never had a problem. But sometimes you get, my mum would have to get him in, if you like, because I was running riot. But every time, he fetches round like that, I just the sight of him, or just the thought even of upsetting him, it wasn't for me. I never admired and loved anybody as much, and And like I say, you just had to say jump, and I was in mid-air, like, you know, and hoping it was high enough.
That's all to do with respect as well, isn't it? Obviously, you
Absolutely, mate.
respected him massively.
Of course I did.
But yeah, obviously when I was growing up, I had my father figure it, but I had the role models in my life where I thought they were role models that were older than me. But they'd been to prison, they were getting into trouble, and I looked up to these type of people.
Yeah.
Did you have that sort of people around you as well?
I did, actually. I did once I got to me my mid-teens, excuse me. Once I got to my mid-teens, you know, I started knocking about with a few of the older lads. I was very cheeky at school, you know, and I was a thief as well. I would take anything off anybody, you know, and not so much blatantly in the face taxing type people, but I was very sneaky, and I had done a lot of thieving. And
was that to do with not having much growing up as well? So
likely, there wasn't
a
lot of money kicking about, mate, you know, that's for sure. I don't want to call it poverty, but we're definitely...
I can definitely relate to that. Like,
that's it, part of the benefit system, and that there was never much money kicking about, you know. It was one of them when the icy pulled up on the front, you know, there was choc ices in the freezer type of thing. It was very much that type of stuff. But
living on smashing beans.
I mate, all kinds, you know. We brought up on sausage, on them tins of sausage beans and toast and that sort of stuff. But you know, it was good. We made good use of what we had. My mum was very resourceful at that sort of stuff, you know. But once I got my mid-teens, I started knocking about. I'd done a bit of boxing by this time. Started knocking about with an older crowd. And as you know, it escalates. You know, I was small enough to get in windows and that, so I was, you know, getting sent here, there and everywhere, and thinking I was impressing people when the chances are I was just getting used, you know what I mean? And as the time went on, I developed some good relationships with them. And it's funny, I was speaking about this a few weeks ago, a lot of them people from that sort of, say, 5-year period when I was growing up, sort of mid-teens to maybe 20, so many of them dead, so many of them in jail, you know, a couple of them not getting out, IPP'd and that. But it's like, you know, it makes us feel very fortunate because I was no better than any of them, you know what I mean? And I was probably, to a degree, I was probably worse because I was trying to impress them all that much. You know what I mean? I would go above and beyond, you know, on these levels of things they were trying to ask, you know, making stuff that they were involved in themselves, you know. But I would go above and beyond the usual sort of scallywag behaviour, if you like, to impress people.
Young and impressionable, and
absolutely.
I was exactly the same. So I can relate to seeing you. So when was it when you like started fighting, like on the streets, getting into fighting? Were you doing that from a young age? No,
even though I boxed from 11, and I had some good wins in that. By that time I was quite well schooled and I'd done all right, but I could never bring myself to fight in the school, secondary school. You know, I had one fight and it was a good fight with a lad who's my pal to this day in the chapel. But you know, it was more frantic. I was more frightened. You know, I was more backed into a corner. I wasn't a game at the time. But when I left school, I had a fight with a lad that was bothering us a bit at school, and been finished school about a year. I think I was about 17. Bumped into him, ironically, near the school, and I remember being in a stinking of a mood that day, and I just sort of charged out to him. And I knew immediately he didn't want it, you know, and I give it to him anyway. And dealt with him quite easily, you know. And I remember thinking, like, this boxing stuff come in really handy, you know, like in this type of format.
Were you surprised at yourself with what you were capable of?
He didn't put up much resistance. I think it was just the shock of you know. Yeah. I don't think he could believe that I'd put it on him in the way I did. And I dealt with him, you know, in seconds, basically. And I remember walking away thinking how easy it was, you know, and kicking myself a little bit, thinking like, all the shit you've took at school after them years from like that gang of lads, you know, chances are you could have dealt with them years ago.
With them beforehand,
you know, and that gives us like, and I felt like, for all the wrong reasons, mind, you know, I felt like I had a bit of catching up to do. You know what I mean? I felt like I needed to make a bit of a mark for myself. And
sometimes it makes you worse than it. All them years that's come behind, and you think it's being pent up, and then when you let it leash, then you unleash yourself.
That's it.
You become unstoppable sometimes, don't you?
Absolutely. I wondered what, you know, and it's that. What was I ever bothered about? You know, what was I ever bothered about? I got in a ring and boxed in working men's clubs and pubs and clubs and club bouts, amateur shows all over the place. It was never a problem then, you know. But it's just something about engaging on the street where I somehow try to wangle myself out of, you know. But I remember after that thinking, you know, I can do this quite easily, like, and for all the wrong reasons. Again, I was kind of looking forward to my next encounter already.
What was it like when you had a drink? Was it even worse? Did you want fights then, or was it all sort of control because you'd done a bit of boxing and stuff? Because
yes and no, you know.
Because with me, obviously, I didn't go down the boxing route, and obviously, when I used to go out fighting, getting pissed up, it would just be full of anger and just wanting to hurt people. And I never started it, but when I went out in the camp, I always ended up finishing it.
Aye, listen, I relate to that a bit. You know, definitely the biggest trouble, if you like, that I've ever been in, and all the greater scale of problems, shall we say, was definitely all influenced by drugs and drink, 100%. But we used, you know, looking back, we had a brilliant time as well. You know,
enjoying it while you were doing it.
Mate, really enjoyed it. You know, that what most lads can relate to. You know, that camaraderie. You know, all the boys together. No one will mess with us. You know, strength in numbers, all game. Nobody bothered. Leave no man behind type crack. You know what I mean? And you get this. You know, it kind of elevates you probably more than what you actually are. You know what I mean? You think you're something that you're not. You know, and there was a lot of that went on.
Yeah.
We went uptown, had a load of scrapes in that uptown. And I always done all right, you know. I got myself, you know, sledgehammered once at the taxi rank when I was about 19. I spoke about it the other week.
I remember you saying that, because I relate to that as well.
But again, it never...
didn't deter you.
No, mate. I woke up thinking, you know, like, I can't let that happen again. You know what I mean? It didn't bother us at all.
But sometimes as well, when you've been out fighting and stuff and it happens to you, you think, fucking hell, you can give it, but you can also take it.
Aye. That's it. I always had a will to win. Once I engaged with somebody, you know, I always had a will to win, you know. I bit off more than I can chew a few times, but I've always come off all right, you know. Once I've started, I'll finish, you know. I've never been one to kind of give up halfway through, or if it's not going my way, you know, give up. It's never
keep going.
Just never been something that's crossed my mind, you know. And you know, I've took some damage, you know. I've probably shaved years off my life through brain damage and that, but aye, mate.
So what when we're getting back to like drugs and stuff, what age did you start dabbling in drugs, and what was it like you started with?
11-year-old, smoked my first spliff, resin.
Tack.
Aye, mate. And it was like a pollen, and I remember thinking, like, I had all this mad psychoactivity just go on. I've shared about this thing in the meeting a few times, you know. When I first was intoxicated by that stuff, it was like my brain just came alive. I remember thinking, I have landed here, you know, this stuff's for me. My brain turned into like a supercomputer. I was like funneling and all this information, like putting it all into different categories and putting it all into like understandable, clear formats. It all just became so clear. You know what I mean? I was like, this is the stuff for me. And I sort of smoked from I was 11-year-old.
Did you always get the giggles?
Aye, you know, the early days, you know, just howling at stuff and getting the munchies and that. And obviously there was no consequences then, you know. I was... The only time I'd never used to smoke it was when I was down the gym training in the boxing, but I would still have it straight after. You know, it never seemed to interfere. Well, it probably did interfere with my training, but it certainly never deterred us from the boxing, you know.
I think I was about the same age. I was 11-year-old when I first started smoking weed and that, so... You used to get a few of us, 5 of us, chipping a pound each.
That's it.
A $5 deal.
That's it.
Every day I got a $5 deal. It's like... So what, obviously when you left school and all that, did you start going out into nightclubs? You've mentioned about when you were fighting at the taxi rank and stuff.
Aye.
Were you going out regular on weekends? And...
Aye. There was a good gang of us, a good gang of lads. You know, all the lads that we grew up with, a few lads from around the town, but a lot of Cuddock lads. And we just loved it. You know, it just seemed to be what we lived for. And, you know, I dabbled a bit with a few trips and that until this time, but I remember taking my first E when I was like 17. I might have been nearly 18. And just a feeling I'd never forget, you know. Not promoting the use of drugs at all, but it was definitely an amazing time in my youth, you know, that we used to take them on a Thursday, gone to work, stay up all night, go to work on the Friday rough. Well, there wasn't such a thing as rough, you just had no sleep.
You didn't get rough when you were...
Well, you didn't. And then we went Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we used to call it a day on Sunday. And we'd done that for about 5 years straight, you know, like 3 and 4 day sessions for like 5 days straight 5 years straight, sorry. And like I say, still need consequences, need come downs, need out like that. And always uptown, in all the pubs, clubs and that. And,
just seemed to be the norm though, didn't it? Like everyone was doing it and it was just... When you were doing it, it was like there was nothing wrong, was there?
Aye.
But it's not until you get at our age now, when you're suffering the consequences, because I've had my mental health, I've had anxiety.
Aye.
And it's all down to drug use at a young age, isn't it?
Of course it is. You know, and I look at some people who I know and who I respect and admire. People my age, people who I went to school with, people who kept out of that sort of clique, you know, and they certainly seem to be a lot more level-headed as people. You know, they're not as up and down, they don't struggle with their emotions as much, you know, and for one thing, you know, they've usually got a lot more, when you're talking about material things, you know, I know a lot of people that's done really well for themselves simply because they've never went down that route.
And they've never wasted the money off their eyes.
That's it. And there's not just exactly the money, but more so the focus. You know, all my focus went, you know, I lived for that. I lived that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Couldn't wait for the Thursday. Lived it for 5 years. That was my whole existence. That's all I wanted to do was get off my nut with the boys. I just lived it. You know, and that was like going back to work on the Monday was like just a load of shit Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday until you could get back on it on the Thursday. And all the focus and that's where your energy flows. That's where your focus goes. And all the people that were doing other things, getting trades and whatever and concentrating on the things that matter in life, you know, they seem to have done really well for themselves.
The thing as well, through it all, what I've seemed to have noticed from you, Danny, I've known you and seen your podcast, you've always worked, haven't you?
Always worked.
You've always worked. At least
always worked.
You've never like bummed on the social and all like that.
No, I've always worked.
You've always managed to hold it down, haven't you?
I first started fitting carpets when I was 16. I had a range of jobs. I worked in the car's biscuit factory and everything when I was 17. Just anything. I wasn't much bothered at the time. Early on, especially, it was just all it was tokens, just tokens for the sesh. You know, it didn't matter what I was doing. You know, I started scaffolding when I was about 22 and still doing it now.
Still doing it now. Probably where you're getting your bits of power and your strength from that from.
It's probably something to do with it, mate.
All the time.
It's a bit of graft, like.
So some of the lads that you went to school with, I know I went out to Carlisle there a few weeks back and I met some of your mates.
Aye.
Are those friends from in school?
Aye.
Because I've met one of your good pals here, Danny B. Is he one of your best friends?
Danny B's one of my very, very good pals.
Is that why does he get Danny B when you Danny C?
Aye. Well, me and him go way, way back, you know. We've probably sparred, I don't know, hundreds of rounds in the amateurs. He boxed for a club down the road called the Villa, and I boxed for the Curragh House. And we sparred. We do a lot of spars, really good spars, and we were tight. Always knocked about together and that. And it was mad when I first went to prison. I ended up locked up with him in the jail.
Right.
I shared a cell with him for 7 weeks.
Right.
And that was and it was class. You know, and as far as jail goes, we know how shit it is, don't we? You know, but see, when you're locked up with someone that you grew up with and you get that connection, that level of crack, you don't mind telling them what's what, and you know what I mean? It was good for prison. It was a really good time locked up with him, you know.
Well, that was the next bit I was getting on. I was going to get onto prison. So how old were you? Like, before I get on that question, sorry, had you been in trouble with the police previously leading up to that?
In and out of trouble. You know,
so we always just getting like
cautions and that, got a few fines and community service and all the other stuff, like, you know. I got all that stuff and I've done my best to avoid it, but not you know, I was talking the other day with some pals. So a lot of things, as I'm sure you know, and a lot of people can identify with. There's so many stuff, so many things, and so many events, and so many happenings and crimes, shall we call them? You know, that we were very, very lucky not to get caught and not to get jailed for some of the things that we've done, because you know we would have been looking at some very heavy sentences. Like,
because how old were you when you went to prison?
34.
34. 34. So you've done well to escape, haven't you, until that point?
Especially well in the circle of friends I was with, you know, definitely.
Because obviously I went to prison when I was 20-year-old, mate, but even at that age I was lucky to have escaped for that long. Though obviously the lifestyle that I was leading.
Running riot.
Running riot and just doing people in and using weapons and stuff. Did you ever use weapons, or were you always just with your hands?
There was one occasion, someone else was talking with you the other week, man. There was one occasion, there was a fella, we'd left a big house party on London Road. I think I was about 17. And it was a a Vectra. He hadn't even been on the road that long. Like, that's how long ago it was, you know, maybe 2002 or something. The Vectras were still pretty new.
Oh.
And there was someone flew by, had a Burberry shirt on. And because we were all in the road with bottles and cans and that, he flew by, like, get out the fucking road, beat him the horn and that, and tried to sort of run a few of us over. I remember a few of us in the road, like, that, come back. And he spun round, he was on his own, fell in about his mid-20s.
Right.
And he jumped out. He jumped out the car and he rushed us all. Well, everyone was boozy. And what we used to do was everyone had rucksacks. Everyone used to go everywhere with rucksacks. You used to put all your bottles in your cans and that in your rucksack and just roam the streets with your rucksack on. So, you know, about 15 of us just took our rucksacks off at one time. And they were all full of bottles and that.
Just going mental.
We caned him really, really bad. And often wondered if he was ever all right, like, because by the time we got about a mile down the road to the field, you could still see the embankment where we left him. You know, he was still laying there. I often wondered, I often hoped he was all right.
But like you see, back then when you're that age, you
didn't care much for it. This sort of, not remorse, but probably to remorse to a certain degree, but this wondering, you know, and this sort of thinking on
the guilt eating at your own,
hoping that he's all right, hoping that he was always all right. Only that's only came in recent years. You know, I'd ran about not absolutely ruthless, not caring about, you know, things like that was his fault in our eyes back at the time. You know, he shouldn't have got out of the car type of thing.
But that could have easily, I've done it myself, I've been in them situations, but them situations could have easily been a murder, couldn't it?
Oh, very easily.
Like, that's like what we've got to be lucky for as well, isn't it?
Of course, mate.
Not just for us, obviously, for them as well.
Absolutely, very grateful.
But yes, like I was saying, when I went to prison when I was 20, from a young age, the people that I grew up around had been to prison. They sort of glamorised it, so I was always, in my head, I always wanted to go to prison. Mm-hmm. And I was buzzing on my way to prison.
Aye.
Fucking what sort of mindset's that, you know what I mean? Didn't get us wrong, when I went and got recalled not too long back, I was fucking hating it. My head was up my arse. But I was on my way to prison, I just wasn't arsed, I was loving it on my way. What were you feeling like when you were on your way to prison? And how long did you get?
Well, I got remanded first time round. I was in just shy of 3 months, about 11 and a half weeks. For harassment and malicious communications and summit. Ended up getting a witness intimidation charge, but I was on 11-week remanded first, and I remember that first time in the wagon going, and I was sick. I was really sick, but I was also very, very angry, like incredibly angry. I got speaking to someone on the bus on the way who I was chatting to for like 10 minutes or more, you know. Seemed all right. And then I told him about maybe 15, 20 minutes into the conversation or something, I told him that it was my first time in jail. He started laughing at us.
Right.
And he started sort of, because there was a few on the bus, he's like saying, we've got a first timer here. You're going to be cleaning my pads, son, and that.
Oh, trying to mug you off.
Aye, and I was like, I didn't know what he looked like, but I was fucking really, really angry about it. You know what I mean? And I never started barking back because I didn't want to cause any potential trouble. But I remember thinking, like, I will clip you, mate. Just give me a chance.
Sometimes when someone pisses you off, you go quiet, haven't you?
Aye, but I was already plotting and scheming. I was quiet, but I was plotting and scheming, And I was quite a bit heavier than I am now. When I first went, I was juicing and that at the time, and I was just in active addiction and that, and I was really hot-headed. And we got off the bus, and he looked at us and sort of looked away, and I don't know if he maybe thought he'd regretted it or what, or whatever, you know what I mean? I don't know, but he looked away, and I thought, right. And you know yourself, when you get up to Durham, you go up the stairs to reception.
Straight up the stairs, aye.
Uncuffed us, took us up the stairs to reception, and he went in front of me. Obviously, you go one at a time, don't you? But they started sort of processing us. There was only 4 on the bus, and instead of putting us all in the room, as there was loads of people there, they were talking, you know, when the officers sort of talking to the receptionists, and I could feel myself wellowing up, like I was crying inside, and I felt my eyes fill up with water, and I blinked and it run down my face, and I don't know, it was like maybe a mixture of embarrassment and rage, and I looked over and he was about 1.5 meters from us, and he just kind of smirked, and I just took a really big step forward and just laid him out.
There'll be all that anger building up inside of you as well, because of all them emotions when you're first going into prison, just running through you.
It was like a bomb waiting to go off, mate. You know what I mean? It was literally like a bomb waiting to go off. And I
Did you
hit him.
feel a release after you'd done that?
No, not particularly. You know, and I got twisted up immediately, like in a nasty fashion. You know what I mean? And I was screaming in pain, but I wasn't just screaming in pain. I was just screaming as a release. You know what I mean? I'd been in there 30 seconds, and I remember screaming so loud. You know, when you scream and then it goes silent because you've kind of put your voice out. You know that when you lose your voice. I was screaming like that, and then it was like a squeak.
No coming out.
I lost my voice. And even that was a mistake in itself, you know, because everyone was settled on the wing and that in about 45 minutes, and I was down the block getting a roasting, you know. So
how long did they keep you down the block?
2 days.
2 days, So fucking hell. But that was one of my questions was going to be how were you feeling like going on to the induction wing, but obviously your induction was down the block, wasn't it?
And I just sat and cried when I was in there, just sat and boiling, you know. And every time the door opened, and every time they come, I was like, I'd put this bit of a macho kind of thing on, and it was the same the whole time when I got on the wing, you know. It was like,
because that's what it's like, and when you first get in, you feel as if you've got people's looking at you and you want to try and...
It's not a fucking place to be showing your vulnerabilities, mate, you know what I mean? And I was putting on a bit of an image, like, you know...
People coming around asking for your stuff, fucking tea bags, vapes, whatever.
And I got like 7 nickings in the first 10 days. And it was like, I've had it questioned a few times, you know, how could you have got that and that? I got 7 nickings in my first 10 days for fighting on the wing, you know, and it was them type of people that were coming asking for whiteners and tea bags and that, mate. I couldn't help myself. And it wasn't just them doing it, it was me. It was all me. I was that angry, yeah. I was that angry, and any chance I had to lash out, I just did.
So how long were you in that time?
Just shy of 12 weeks on remand.
12 weeks, aye.
And my granddad was dying. I got
Were you just in Durham for this whole time?
Just in Durham on remand. My granddad was, you know, he was on his way out. I'm not sure what to call it or anything like that, but you know when the doctor kind of says you want to
end of life for
so long to live. So my barrister and that appealed because of the relationship I had with him, because I'd lived with him and that. You know, my bail went through, and it was like compassionate bail with immediate release. And I remember getting out, walking out the gates, felt brilliant. You know, even after 11 weeks, man, it felt great getting out them gates. The ex-wife come and picked us up with the kids, embracing all the kids, and that was mint, you know, because I'd only spoke to them on the phone and I was missing them. We went back to Carlisle, shot straight back to Carlisle with a 66, and I went into my granddad's house, and there was nurses and stuff there. And at this time, you know, my mum and the ex-wife and all that told my granddad I was working away, because I used to work away anyway.
Sorry.
You know, I couldn't have him knowing that I was in prison. You know what I mean? This is the sort.
Not when he's ill like that.
And this is me at 34-year-old. That's like still the level of respect I had for him. I was still like his blue-eyed boy. You know, I couldn't. Any way I could have had him known that. And my mum and nobody would have him known it. And his eyes weren't too good, so I couldn't read the papers and that no more. You know, so I could kind of blag it there. And I walked in and the nurses were there. The nurses cleared the room and gave us a minute. He was staying in his back bedroom at this point because he couldn't manage the stairs. And he was like, "Is that Danny?" His eyes, bless him, his eyes were stuck together with like sleep and that, you know, he couldn't open his eyes at all. Excuse me. And you know, "Is that Danny?" And I says, "Hi." And he put his hand out. And I held his hand. He said some of the nicest things, you know, he's ever said to us. You know, me and my mum weren't exactly getting on at that time, you know, but he wasn't none the wiser of this stuff. And he said, "All I want is for you and your mum to get on," you know. A load of stuff which I've always kept to myself, you know, and that's where it'll stay. Yeah. Really, really nice things. But, you know, words to the effect of, you know, you're only here once, you know what I mean? I need you to have a good relationship with your mum. You know, and from that day forward, you know, I really made the effort with my mum, and me and my mum's as close as ever. But it was a sad day, mate, a very sad day. I says, I'm gonna come back in the morning. I rung my mother and said, "Listen, the nurses and that are on duty anyway." I says, "Can you tell him not to bother with his breakfast in the morning, because I'm going to come back and I'm going to knock him his eggs up and that." I'm going to come back in the morning. He was dead within the hour.
Was he?
Aye. And it was sad, like, but...
At least you got to get out of scene, didn't you? Because it would have destroyed you, wouldn't you, if you couldn't?
I thank my higher power, and I've just been so grateful for that. Looking back, you know, how different my head would have been and how different my mindset would have been if I never got to see him in his dying hour. You know, it would have been a very different... It could have changed me as a person for the worse, you know.
Luckily, you were just on remand still, because if it was left up to the prison,
that's it. I would very much doubt I'd have got out.
With one of my pals recently who was just not long getting out, his mother died whilst he was in prison, and he was like the next of kin. He had to organise the funeral from prison, and they didn't even let him go to the funeral, and that was his own mother.
Well, that's it. But immediate family, you struggle enough getting to immediate family. What chances would I have had of going to see my granddad? You know, if I was sentenced.
A blessing for you to be able to get there, isn't it?
It definitely was, mate. Big blessing.
So how long after was it when you went back in?
Done about 10, 11 weeks. I was walking about on a tag, and I got a 16-month sentence for witness intimidation, harassment, malicious communications. You know, I just felt like I'd been ripped off. You know, I felt like I'd been ripped right off. You know, I won't go into it too much, but all I was trying to do was sort of have a fight with somebody. That's all I wanted to do. You know, and I had all this negativity going on in my own life. I just lost my granddad. You know, and all the anger issues and everything had like come to a point. Addiction was rife at this point. You know what I mean? I couldn't go.
I could quite imagine.
Couldn't go a few hours without my desired substances. You know what I mean? I was just flat out on the gear, and all that stuff, all my own negativity and all that stuff, I channeled it at this thing. You know, this chance of a fight with this. You know, someone, let's just say, who I don't see eye to eye with. You know, at the time there was a massive level of hatred. You know, for what was going on. And all I wanted to do was get a fight sorted, you know. You know, and it ended up, you know, this subject ended up stood in the witness box, you know, pointing the finger. And like I say, that was what it was. But when I got sentenced, I was like...
all that anger still there.
It was much worse than what it was the first time round, because it's for real now. I'm sentenced, even though when you're on remand, it's a bit suspenseful because you don't know what's coming.
So know that you're on the way back to prison in the paddy wagon. You know what's coming. Was your mind different this time? Were you thinking different, or were you
towards prison? I was.
Or were you ready to go in there and just start fucking unleashing?
I only had a couple of fights when I went back. You know, I was in there about just shy of 3 weeks. And because my offence was it was like harassment without violence, witness intimidation without violence, it was called. Some, like, there's sections of it, isn't there? Like levels of it.
There is.
So I immediately qualified for Cat D. So I was like, laughing, you know what I mean? And heading back to prison, I was told that by my brief before I got in the thing. He said, you're going to be in an open jail before long because of the category of your offence. So I was like, right. And I wasn't bothered about prison because I'd already had a little taste of it, you know what I mean? And it wasn't so much the prison, but again, my cell in that box on the way with nothing but your own thoughts to torture yourself, you know. And 16 months, I was like, I just felt ripped off. Felt really ripped off.
But this is where me and Danny actually met each other, wasn't it? Durham prison,
Durham jail. That's it, mate.
I was on the servery, wasn't I?
You were, mate. Aye.
Because I was getting moved to home house, you were going to Kirkham on the same day, wasn't it?
That's it, mate. Aye. Jail went relatively smoothly. There was a few of the old faces, and that was still there from the first time on B wing. Just kind of blended back in for a few weeks, if you like, and just waiting to get took out of there. I remember speaking to a screw about my allocation. I was speaking to a screw about my allocation in the queue, and kid pushed in front of us, and I was relatively, I say a lot calmer than I was the first time round in there. Lad pushed in front of us. I've probably told you it was, you know, I won't mention his name because it's distasteful, but I remember saying, hey mate, you know, do I not exist or something, you know? And he sort of just looked out his shoulder and just said, just deal with it, you little mug. And about 2 minutes went by, you know, this is outside the servery. 2 minutes went by and it just had to wear us, you know what I mean? It really had to wear us, like, you know what I mean? You know, when you think people are laughing at you.
It does.
I think
you feel like you're being dissed.
That's what it was. I felt like people were laughing at us.
If you don't react, then it'll just get worse, won't it?
And I just picked my moment, mate, and I just sniped him from the back. I elbowed him right in the ear. And I remember it just split wide open. And he was on the floor. I was giving him a few digs and, like, you know, when he sort of crouched over someone, like booting them as well. And I've done a bit of a job on him in about 10 seconds. And there's a screw, and I can't remember his name, but in Durham, the little one with the cauliflower ears does all the jiu-jitsu and that.
Right.
He just single-handedly wrapped us up all, and I was pretty strong in that at the time, mate. He just dumped us on my head and just twisted us up and walked us back to my cell. And 2 days later, they come and got us for Kirkham. So I'm thinking, what's, sound?
I
remember thinking, sound, I'm out of here.
Get out there before you get the nick.
That's it. and that's what happened.
Oh, you got it afterwards.
And I got there, landed at Kirkham, mate, and day after I seen you. I was there, spent one night there, about 23 hours or something. Come and got us the next day. Christie locked the induction wing down and you gone. Nickens come through on the system.
Oh, what a sick now.
Mate. I remember walking into that jail thinking, I said it before, I thought I was at a christening. Because there's like birds and bands and that everywhere, because you're allowed them in it, to the chapel and that. It's like everyone's missus and that's
family
in there.
Visits and that.
Bands and that gnashing about, just openly, not in like a visitor centre, like gnashing about the jail. And I went in, they give you like this big, like a Tupperware like that. And it goes like inside, it's like a smaller. And it goes all the way down to the tiny Tupperware. That's like your dinner set.
Is it?
You can have as much food as you want. And there's like wings and that. Oh, I was like, this is mint. And the next morning, you got to Preston.
Oh, sick, man.
By that time, I'd done 3 jails in 3 days. And I was boiling like...
Is that where they kept you then? Is that where you...
No, I was in there for 17 nights over Christmas. Not a nice place. And
so was that the Christie prison in Preston?
Aye, very much like Durham, Victorian-style jail. Right. But you see our way, I know we're an hour or so apart, but you see like the Durham lads, it's very much a type of similar crack, isn't it? It's our crack, isn't it?
It is.
It's like our banter, you know what I mean? They're all sort of similar banter, isn't it? It's similar sort of crack.
Yeah.
See down there, mate, it wasn't. It's all Manx and Scousers and that.
Is it?
Majority Manx and Scousers, so the crack's very different. It's all probably what I can only describe it as like gangsterfied. You know what I mean? It's all that. It's all that, mate.
Well, them Scousers are hyper as fuck as well.
Oh, mate.
The game is toast, but the fucking hyper as fuck.
Oh, mate, they don't shut up. I met some good ones, you know what I mean? But they're notoriously loud, especially in the prison system, and I was like hating it, absolutely hating it. There was this big screw called Mr. Brown. He was about 22, 23 stone, a lump and a bully. And I was only in there 2 nights, and I was like, because I was in the induction bit in this C1 in like a dungeon, you only get out for your scran and back. You're locked up the whole time. And I was walking in, I was speaking to someone or something, a lad Ritson was in over the way.
Right, aye.
Speaking to him, walking back with my tray. And he's like, "Hurry up, lad." And I think I just ignored him because I was on my way anyway. And I got the cell door and just like that behind me head, just like launched us in the pad. And I like wrestling, so I didn't spill my food and that. And I was like, and I looked at the flap, I was going to give him a load of room, but he was just staring at us. And I was like, you know what I mean? I'll just leave him. But over Christmas, day before Christmas Eve, the massive turning point in my life in there. One of the most significant moments I can ever remember in my life. The chaplain come and got us. Big Asian fella come and got us, and I knew it was bad. I just knew it was bad, I'd already had my little visit from the chaplain and that. I think I was about 14 days in or something like that, 2 week-ish. Come down to the chapel. Told us my auntie had died from Burnley, my dad's sister. I've always been really close to my family down Burnley. I'm there all the time. Put it like a second home to us, Big shout out to the Burnley lads, Burnley Wood. Told us my auntie had died, and I was very, very close to her. She was a big part of my childhood, And I cried a river, uncontrollably crying, It was that one of them moments where I couldn't stop crying. I actually couldn't stop. I think I was down there about an hour and 20 minutes. I couldn't stop crying. I just literally couldn't stop. I cried an absolute river. And at that moment, I was on my knees in a chapel in front of a cross. And I'm not saying I found God there and then or anything, because I didn't. But what I've realised was, that it was all my fault. Up until that day, it was everyone else's fault. I shouldn't have been in prison. I shouldn't have been sent to prison for calling somebody names. And all this stuff. I was like, I just felt ripped off until that day. And I just walked out of there and I sat in my pad with one of them little plastic tile mirrors. I stared at myself for ages. And I mean, I was just locked eyes with myself for hours, you know, and it all come flooding.
Just contemplating your life.
All come flooding in, mate. All the damage I'd done, not only to myself and all the self-harming, if you like, that I'd done, putting myself in these situations all the time for years, but you know, but the time I'm costing me, you know, I'm costing my family, my bairns, and that I haven't got a dad about, and all the stuff that came with it. Immediately seeing all the wrong I'd done, you know, and only at that point took like a full accountability and responsibility for all my wrongdoings. Up until then, I just blame everyone else, and never take the blame. But from that day forward, it was like,
I can totally relate to that, because it's exactly what you're saying. I was going to say to you, did prison work for you, and did it change you?
It did that time, mate.
Like you've just mentioned there, the same thing happened with me when I got recalled to prison. I was blaming probation, blaming police. They shouldn't have recalled us. For 6 months, I was fucking bitter. But it wasn't until my kids back home were fucking on the phone saying, "Daddy, when you're coming home?" But I couldn't tell them because I'm IPP. And then I totally changed my mindset and thought, you know what, it's me that landed myself in here. It's me that needs to sort this situation out. And that's when I totally become a different person and sorted myself out. So obviously prison worked for you as well, did it?
It did. It did, to the point where that's the biggest thing it ever gave us. It gave us some accountability and responsibility for my own actions, which someone I'd never took responsibility for anything I've ever done.
But I bet you started feeling better after that as well.
I did slowly but surely. That was almost like the first day of the person I was to become, because it was like, it was a process, mate. Don't get us wrong, but for the first time ever, I was looking at things differently. It was a mad, significant. It took a bereavement in the family for it to happen, and I'd already had multiple bereavements, lost loads of mates and family beforehand, but that was just, everything just came to a point that day.
Maybe it's because you were in prison as well. Maybe if you weren't in prison, you might not have dealt with it that way.
Well, that's it, because you know yourself, you can go and put your focus on other things when you're outside. When you're in jail, you've got nothing but you and your thoughts. You're just all by yourself, aren't you? And you're stuck with your thoughts, staring at the walls. It was a big moment, like, and I was using in jail every day, you know what I mean? I was using all the prison drugs. You know, it didn't bother me, you know what I mean? It didn't bother me what I was taking. I was not willing to go behind my door for 16, 17 hours on a straight head. The thought of it, I just couldn't comprehend it.
What about after this, with your auntie? Is that when did you stop using drugs?
No.
Or were you still?
I wanted to, and I was in for another 4 months. 4.5 months or something I was in. I went, after the 17, 18 nights in there, I went to Lancaster Farms. Drugs everywhere again.
Was that another Cat C prison?
Cat C prison, cushy little jail as far as jails go, you know, it was all right. But I was still using in Preston, but I remember that when my head sort of changed a bit, the day after I found the news out, I was scoring on the wing, you know, dinner time, and that's the only time I'm getting out, you know, and you're chatting to people and that, getting something sorted. Phone time. As soon as you get your phone out, I'm like, transfer this over there. You know what I mean? Chuck 40 quid over this way or something, you know what I mean? Begging and scrounging off my family and friends to try and get some money wired to someone. And because as an addict, you know what I mean? You're always plotting and scheming and finding ways and means to score, you know what I mean? So I was relentless. I could always get it. I could always manage to get what I wanted. But every time I got it after that day, I was like, right, this is my last. This is my last. That went on every day, mind. The whole time I was in jail. But that was the starting point of me wanting to stop.
Yeah.
I couldn't, but I wanted to. You know, up until before that, I thought I'd probably just be a drug user my entire life, you know. And I'd be all right when I got out, because I could take my substances of choice and I wouldn't have to take DV Subby and Spice and everything else. And that's just to get us by in jail. When I get out, I can go back to what I want to take. And that was my mindset until that day. I wanted to stop after that day, but I couldn't.
So what was it like when you knew you were getting out leading up to your release? Were you planning on anything when you were out?
Aye, mate.
Did you go straight back to partying? And
I seen a lass at the time. And she rung us and said, you know, basically asked us what she wanted to fetch down when she picked us up. And I said, just fetch as many packets as you can. You know?
Flat out.
Aye. And I was blitzed before I even left Lancaster, you know, on the motorway all the way home, sitting JD straight and a lot of packets and that. Aye. You know, but I still didn't want it. If that makes sense. I would have, listen.
Afterwards, did you feel like shit? Feel like you wish you hadn't done it?
Every time I done it, especially with them packets and that stuff, because it just
mess with your head.
You're too much thinking, But I continued, you know, I was stopping every day. And of course, my excuse and my mindset at the time, I'll just have this one when I get out, because I'm out, aren't I? I'm getting out to Starry, so I'll have a good blitz, and I'll knock it on the Eid. And that went on for another 2 years or more, you know.
So did you meet, say in prison, 90% of the people on the wings are just people that you wouldn't associate with again, but you do meet a handful of people that are really fucking, even though they're in prison,
Of course you do.
like-minded people, you become really good friends with people. And you stay in contact. Have you met many
stopped
people
in contact with a decent...
Obviously, me and you have met in prison, we stayed in contact.
That's it, mate. But I did. I met some good lads. You know, I met some decent lads who I probably wouldn't want to contact again, if that makes sense. Decent lads, but I'll leave them where they are.
I leave them where they are.
But I did meet some lads who I do keep in touch with, and I'm pretty tight with them. You know, it's funny, you know, yourself. Obviously, a couple of month period.
Yeah.
Been on the same wing with somebody, maybe he's doing a bit of gym or a bit of work with someone in jail. You seem to get the relationship comes along a lot faster than it ever would on the street.
Because you're living with someone, aren't you?
Well, you are
constantly.
You are, you know what I mean. And I got
to know them inside out.
Bingo, you know, and you get to know the habits and the mindset and that, you know, over quite a short period of time. And I remain tight with a few lads.
So you were saying after you got out of prison and went on for 2 years, what? Obviously, everyone who watches Danny and that know, everyone knows you're clean, you're sober.
6 months clean, mate.
When was it that you actually stopped, and why? What made you stop, and how come you've carried on the way you are now? Because obviously, the life you've led, it's a massive thing for you, how you've managed to stop, and you haven't went backwards. So what was the turning point? What made you stop?
Well, on the run-up to us stopping, even though I wanted to stop all the time, you know, and I was desperately trying to stop but couldn't. You know, every time I ran out, I needed more. I didn't want it no more. I just needed it. I was bound, you know, by these substances. I was a proper addict. You know what I mean? Every time I had it, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with taking it, but I just felt like my body needed them. I needed them to function. I needed them to go to work. I needed them for everyday life. You know what I mean? And that's at least what I told myself. And on the run up to us stopping, I started eating more and more volume. You know what I mean? It went from like a couple after the session to get us to sleep to like I better just take a couple before work as well. And then I'll probably sneak a couple in at dinner time. And this just went on. And I ended up with a mess, mate. They mess you up, them things. Like,
nasty on.
Mate, they messed us up. And it started spilling over into all the, you know, decent relationships I had. You know what I mean? It kind of come a lot of carelessness and selfishness, and that started magnifying more than it ever was. And I was always pretty careless and selfish anyway. But this come to a point, I really wasn't happy with myself by this time. I really disliked myself, you know. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I didn't like the person I'd become, you know. And even in that stage, I'd sort of give in. You know, in the months running up to me eventually getting in recovery, I was like, sod it.
Yeah.
I'm always going to do this. Who are you kidding? You know what I mean?
Who are
you trying to kid, mate? You know what I mean? You've been at this for long enough now. You know what I mean? This is going to be you till your dying day and that. And all that stuff. And I kind of started to believe it for a while. Started to believe I was never going to stop. And I couldn't stop.
The hardest battles with yourself, isn't it?
Mate. The desire to stop was there, but I just wasn't able. No way, no how was I able. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the mindset. I didn't know where to start. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be doing this forever. You know what I mean? Stop worrying about it. You're costing yourself your peace. Trying to do something that you just can't do. You know what I mean? So, day before New Year's Eve last year, I had someone come up for a bit session. Fetched a range of drugs, you know. And I was sorting some myself, you know what I mean? Whatever he didn't have, I brought. And we had like a bundle, shall we say. And we'd done a lot in. And I knew straight away this lad's mindset wasn't as bad as mine. You know, like, I remember sort of trying to get a kip in that. And he was just like, right, I'm gone. I'm gonna go and get a train. All that's gone now. I'm gonna get a train and come back down home. Good to see you in that, mate, and that. And he left. And I just burst out crying. I absolutely cried a river again. like big time, mate. I was sobbing her. I was a proper mess. Looking about at the state of my house that I was living in, after some party house it had turned into, you know what I mean? Only bothered having a quick whip round on the weekends when the bands come. Other than that, it just stayed, empty cans and that all in my house, and that was a mess, mate. And it was a build-up, you know, because it wasn't always like that. It just progressively got worse to that stage. And I sat and put my head in my hands and cried. And cried some more. I was an absolute mess. I was hysterical, actually, is what I was. Couldn't stop crying. Anyways, I went out and scored some weed. I might chill us out a bit or something, I thought. And my brother-in-law, ex-brother-in-law come round. I was married to his sister for like 10 years or more. Come round. And I noticed this new lease of life in him. You know what I mean? He was bouncing. He had this energy that I'd never seen before. You know what I mean? He looked really well in the face. He was sounding different as well. Wasn't sounding quite as highly strung as he usually is, you know what I mean? Started talking a lot of sense and that. And I've been getting recovery, he said. I've been getting the meetings. I can't remember what he was clean at the time. I think it was about 3 or 4 months clean, you know what I mean? Which is a lot for him and people around there in them circles, you know?
Yeah.
He says, get yourself the meetings, man. And I was like, right. He said it's on Monday, and he come down and got us. I thought, I just didn't think much of it. Wasn't, you know, I thought. I still have that mindset where I thought they were probably just like a load of hippies or something.
I think it was just kind of a load of shite.
Just some load of hippies sat in the room, you know. I thought, just not for me, you know. It won't be for me. I'm telling myself, this won't be for me, this. But I remember how different he noticed, you know, and he's like, what you got to lose? I'll come for you on Monday. And I'd forgot all about it. It's actually smoking weed in the house when he come. And he come and he says, right, away we're gone. And I never forget that first meeting, how I felt. Just sat there and listened. Never said anything, just listened to all the other addicts in there. You know, and the thing about the fellowship is everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants a new way of life. Everyone wants sobriety. You know, I'm just listening to some of the shares and that. The identification I got was unbelievable. I thought I was the worst ever. You know,
you've seen other people's stories.
You think you're the worst ever, you know. And I remember, I knew I was in the right place. I remember thinking I'm in the right place here, but I've still got some volume in the raw. You know, I can't give them away.
Oh, I still got that little devil in you.
Can't give them away type thing. So I missed the next meeting because I was having tablets and that, you know, but I kind of promised myself that I wasn't going to get any more. And during between the meeting, when I missed the meeting and the other meeting, I ended up getting myself dead upset again. You know what I mean? Get myself dead upset again. Really emotional and that.
Because you knew you wanted a better future for yourself, didn't you? But you found it hard, isn't it?
Exactly what it was, mate. But I was really struggling with it. So, anyways, I went back down, and the first time I give it everything. And I went 59 days. Maybe didn't give everything. I give it as much as I could at the time, and I went 59 days clean. And I remember them first, maybe day 5 to day 9, coming off them tablets. I never forget the pain. You know, like all these constricting pains and like really physically ill, like flu symptoms times 1,000. I was really badly, really badly, you know, like coming off it, withdrawing.
Yeah.
You know, I was so badly. And but I got through it. I knew there was light at the end of the tunnel, you know. And I went 59 days. And I took my eye off the ball a little bit and missed a couple of meetings. And, you know, next thing you know, hey presto, I'm back in the mix of it for a couple of days. But then you see, I knew what was working. I knew I'd went them 59 days, which is the longest stint I'd ever been. You know, I'd maybe only gone 2 days on the wing. And that's when there was nothing. That was not through choice.
Yeah.
So once I got them days, I kind of knew how it would be done, you know, associating with other people who want the same thing, recovering addicts. As they say in the fellowship, you know, the power of one recovering addict helping another it's unparalleled. You know, there's nothing like it. You know, nobody can identify with you more than another addict. You know, they're the people you get the sense from.
Yeah. Listening to their stories as well.
Aye, that's it. And the stories of strength and hope. You know, I first went in there and there's like my sponsor, you know, 17 years clean. I was like, wow, how on earth do you gather that sort of... And at first, I'll be honest, the clean time kind of scared us. I was overthinking it. You know, especially when I lost my 59 days. I thought, I was like, no.
I think you were back to square one.
Aye. And I remember thinking, like, how on earth do they get that level of clean time? People with multiple years clean time. I couldn't get my head around it. And to be honest, it irritated the life out of us because I thought at first it's like some kind of competition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's where my head was. I want more than them. You know, type of thing.
I start becoming competition.
Aye. But you know, you quickly realise, you know, that the only way these days accumulate is by taking it one day at a time. It's a just for today program, and that's what I tell myself every morning when I wake up.
But them first few weeks when you got over the 4th week, the feeling of being fresh.
Oh, mate,
it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
And I think you start using avenues in your brain that have been switched off for years. They've been switched off for years.
Not to bother you, is it? We're like,
nah.
Things that if you've had a drink, you've got jobs to do, and like you think, you keep putting it off. But when you're fresh, you're just on it, aren't you?
And bingo, mate. And see the amount of stuff I was getting done in a day because I had to keep busy. Yeah, I couldn't have any couch time. That was my thing. If I sit on the couch for 20 minutes through the day, I'll use. And I knew I would have. So I'll keep myself busy. So like the power of the pen, you know what I mean? That's to tell you, write stuff down. So at first I would start writing why I was grateful. And at first it was hard thinking of things you're grateful for. Now, mate, I can write for hours about stuff I'm grateful for. But at the start I was like, what am I grateful for? I couldn't think what I was grateful for. Grateful to be alive. That's about all I could put down. But your list starts getting bigger and bigger as you go on. And then I put down what do I want out of myself out of this day? What can I do to make my day better? You know, and all this stuff might sound stupid to some people, but
I can totally relate to it because obviously,
you know, when you're desperate for change, you know, absolutely desperate for a new way of life, you try anything.
But when you get like this as well, what you've got to also do, you'll have done it yourself because obviously, since I've been out of prison, I've been out 20 months now. I've had the odd few drinks, a couple of blowouts.
Yeah.
But I keep off it now. I haven't had a drink for 8 weeks myself now. But yeah, the feeling that you get of being fresh is just unreal. But
it is.
You've got to forget about other people's thoughts, what other people might think of you. Because sometimes that can hold you back on to thinking, what are people thinking of us? But you just forget about all that. Do what makes you happy, isn't it?
It takes you a little while though, doesn't it?
It does,
especially when you've been in like the group of lads that I grew up with. You see, it's a shame to say, but you know, I don't hardly speak to none of them no more. You know, and I've had to have it that way. I've had to change everything in my life.
But are you happy? That's the main thing.
I'm happy. Happiest I've ever been.
Exactly. You know? That's all it comes down to.
That's it. I've got a few of them keep in touch. And I'll speak to them all in the street and I wish them all well. You know, but
look at all the things you're achieving now. You've took a deal with BKFC.
Aye, mate.
Your second fight's coming up next month.
That's it.
Massive well done to you, mate. You've done amazing things. You've done well, you know what I mean?
Thank you very much, mate.
But what does the future hold for you now? I know you've got your fights coming up and stuff.
Good question. I like that. Aye.
What does the future hold for you, and what do you want for yourself? What do you see?
You know,
because everybody wants something, and but the way your life's going, you're gonna get
it. First of all, you know, I want to be clean. You know, I wouldn't have anything that I've got now in a relatively short space of time. 6 months clean, and life's good. You know, so I must stay clean. I must stay part of the program, and that's above and beyond anything.
Yeah.
Because I can't be the father that I want to my kids, and I can't be the person I want to be if I don't. So I want to be clean. And, you know, I want to leave something behind. You know, I'm trying my best to build something with this BKB, and we'll see how it goes. Taking in a fight at the time, it's definitely getting 100%. So I'd like to leave something. So, you know, in a couple of years' time or whatever, you know, my Benz and that can look and say, that's my father there. You know, that was my dad there. You know, because, you know,
that's what it all comes down to, don't it? You want your kids to be proud of you. You want to be the best father to you.
Know, and we never know the minute. You know, we never know the minute, do we? We never know when we're not going to be here anymore. You know, and I live my life very much that way now.
That's it.
I haven't got massive plans and massive admirations, you know. I want to be known for someone who, you know, who tried. And if I can be a representation of anything, I'd like it to be a recovering addict, you know.
Well, anybody who's from the outside watching and looking at you and looking at your journey, if they can't be happy for you, then they're not worth the time of day.
Oh, well, that's their issue, mate, you know.
Well, it is, but you see a lot of shit what people write and all that, but for you to do what you've done, turn your life around. You're being the best father to your kids now. You're making that up. You've got to take your hats off to you.
Thank you, mate.
But what I'm going to finish with, what I do on all of my podcasts, is
Yes, bro.
because my aim is to try and help the kids now, not go down the path that we went down, and try and teach them like where we went wrong and try and be good role models for them. So what would you say to kids going down the wrong path? What advice could you give to them, or what would you?
Wow.
What can you say to them?
Wow, mate.
Because there will be a lot of kids out there watching this and looking up to you.
You know, it's a tough one because, firstly, you know, I don't think there was a time when I really needed some strength, guidance, and help. But I think it applies to a lot of people. You know, sometimes it doesn't matter what you say. You know, don't get us wrong. Of course, you know, all the things that are going to make you a good, better person. You know, concentrate on your schooling. You know what I mean? Concentrate on your school, and I would say find a sport, or find anything what you're good at. Everybody's good at something, you know, and that's a fact. Everybody is good at something. You know, some people can do things that others can't, and that applies to everything. Find something what you're good at, stick at it, and go for it. Have a dream, you know, dream big, you know, dream big, stick in. It's a difficult one, mate, you know, because...
Well, the way you've answered it is what I normally say when I speak to the young ones who come into my gym. I'll say, get yourself into the gym, get yourself into a sport, concentrate on something, and do something positive.
Of course.
Like do boxing classes, just anything to keep you off the streets. Don't follow the groups and don't go out and get drunk and take drugs just because other people are. Because that's mainly why a lot of people do it, isn't it?
You know, if your focus and your attention is going on whatever it might be going on, right? That's where your energy is going to flow. You know, your focus goes where your energy flows. So if you can find something, you know, that's gonna give you that dream, gonna give you that something to work towards, you know, I would say give it everything you've got, because, you know, we're not here forever. You don't want to be getting into your late 20s and late 30s and, you know, going down the life that I went down when you've just got nothing to show for it. Absolutely, you get to that age and you've got nothing, you know. Start young, get yourself into something that you're good at and stick to it, because, you know, anybody can do it. Anybody can achieve anything. Nothing's impossible in this world, you know. This is a beautiful world we live in. And if we put our focus to it, we can have anything we like.
And don't be a divvy mush.
Don't be a divvy shabber.
Right, thanks for watching, everyone. Cheers, Danny.
Nice one, mate. My man. Is that about an hour?
An hour.